Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. It's your host, Dhaiphong. Make sure you hit the like button as we come on. As you can see, I am joined by Professor Jeffrey Sachs. He's an economist, a geopolitical analyst, friend of the show, currently serving as a director for the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University and is the president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Professor Sachs, good to be with you.
Great to see you again. Thanks
Yes,
a lot.
yes. It's always a pleasure. So, Professor Sachs, as there's been a lot of enthusiasm about renewed U.S.-Russia talks, there's been a breakthrough on the front line. Russia has moved over a dozen kilometers around the Pokrovsk area, and the Ukrainian military has been sounding the alarm even in the New York Times. Now, this comes amid these talks between the U.S. and Russia that are now renewed and are going to go to the highest level. Talk about what Donald Trump, because he is saying that he's going to get land back for Ukraine. What is Donald Trump misunderstanding about Russia and about this war?
First of all, it's very hard always to understand Donald Trump, what he means by any phrase, by land swaps or anything else. Everything is imprecise, varying by the hour and day. So I don't take the words literally. He doesn't mean them literally. What supposedly could be meant by this in terms of swaps is that Russia would get, quote unquote, all of two oblasts, Donetsk and Lugansk, the Donbas oblasts, and it would, quote, swap area that it has claimed in Zaporizhia and Kherson that it doesn't control right now. So that would be called a swap. It would say Kherson City or Zaporizhia City would remain Ukrainian and Russia would stay in the parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia where its troops have reached the front lines, but not beyond that. That could be what's meant by a land swap. Honestly, until something is spelled out, trying to figure out what Donald Trump means is just not possible precisely.
Yeah, and Russia and Vladimir Putin's approach has been, as it always is, very diplomatic on the one hand, but there are rumors of Ukraine. Of course, we know that Ukraine is very much against any kind of settlement of this conflict at this time. And there's even rumors that they might try a kind of Kursk invasion in the Bryansk region. So given that the situation on the battlefield is still very much fluid, what do you make of the current state of the conflict and ultimately how the United States under the Trump administration has addressed it up until this point? Because it wasn't too long ago that there was just ultimatum after ultimatum to Russia.
Of course, I'm not a military authority. I'm a consumer of military news and information. My strong impression from very carefully monitoring what is said by a number of sources is that Russia is winning on the battlefield, that Ukraine does not have the personnel to proceed, and it also can't match Russia on many of the munitions and armaments. That makes perfect sense to me. It is clear that in a war of attrition, as this one essentially is, Russia's going to win this war. That, I think, was obvious from the start. So in this sense, Zelensky's refusal to negotiate does no favor to the Ukrainian people. It's not what the Ukrainian people actually want, as best we can tell. The most recent survey data that is being widely discussed shows that a significant majority of the Ukrainian people want the war to end with negotiations. Zelensky is a military dictator in essence right now. He rules basically without a vote. He is long past his term of office. I'm underwhelmed by Zelensky and have been from the very start. Of course, I have regarded him mostly as a puppet of a variety of forces, the extreme nationalist right of Ukraine on the one part, the United States for a long time. And when the United States started to say, we don't want to go on with this gambit of ours because it failed, then of the Europeans. No doubt Zelensky's in a tough fix, but he's putting his countrymen in an even far worse situation. This war should stop. There should be a settlement on the basis of neutrality, an end of this absolutely reckless U.S. adventure started in the 1990s of moving NATO to Ukraine and to Georgia, and some territorial losses because the United States and the Ukrainian post-2014 regime gambled, and they lost. They had many chances to avoid losing the Donbass. It was called the Minsk II agreements. But the United States and Ukraine said, no, we're not going to honor the Minsk II agreements. We're not going to give autonomy to the eastern regions of Ukraine, that is Lugansk and Donetsk. They gambled. I know that the American officials thought that they had the winning hand. I never think much of American strategists, by the way. They're failures. They're not very clever. They got this wrong, and I think predictably so. So this is a gamble that's failed. But Zelensky, for many reasons that are absolutely hard to weight appropriately or give a precise estimation, fights with the lives of his countrymen. It could be the mega corruption that is no doubt present in Ukraine. It could be his fear of the extreme right, that they would take him out if he made a compromise. A senior Ukrainian official said that to me many years ago. Well, Zelensky has no choice. If that's true, he should not have stayed in the job. For whatever reason, he's doing great damage to Ukraine and to the people of Ukraine. They're getting killed in huge numbers. They are losing on the battlefield. There was no way to win this war because either they, quote, would be winning it and then there would be an escalation, perhaps to nuclear war, or they would lose. There was no winning this war. This is a crazy U.S. gambit, as I said, going back to the 1990s to win a piece on the global chessboard. That's what Brzezinski said. That's what he wanted. That's what he wrote in Foreign Affairs in 1997 in the Geostrategy for Eurasia. That's what he explained in the Grand Chessboard. And it's been played out. And Brzezinski got it wrong, badly wrong. And all the presidents played out this game. They kept thinking they could win their way or bluff their way to grabbing Ukraine for the U.S. side. And Russia was never going to let it happen. And it should never have been tried.
Professor Sachs, is there truly a way out? I want to know your kind of understanding and analysis, given your experience. You know, you sat with leaders, you've advised them. How would an actual statesman or a diplomat actually approach this issue? Because as you just laid out, the situation is bad. And the latest news leading up to renewed US-Russia talks are not good for the Ukraine, US, NATO side. So how do they handle this? Because right now, despite the enthusiasm, there still is a lot of talk of kind of dictating terms to Russia, which doesn't appear to be very diplomatic in many respects. But how would a real statesman handle this, Professor Sachs?
It's a great question, Danny. And it's not an easy one to answer for a reason that will become clear. I wrote a book about one such episode, and that was the Cuban Missile Crisis and the aftermath, in which the U.S. and the Soviet Union negotiated the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And I wrote a book about John F. Kennedy's leadership from the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis through the successful negotiation and then Senate ratification of the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And the essence of the story is that first, Kennedy understood that there was a win-win to peace, and there was a real risk of nuclear annihilation if Kennedy listened to the hardliners. Second, he understood, this is back in 1962 and 63, that Khrushchev, his Soviet counterpart, was in the same situation as he was, hearing from hardliners, but understanding it's too dangerous to go the hardline route. Well, Kennedy and Khrushchev found their way out of the Cuban Missile Crisis peacefully. Both sides withdrew short-range offensive nuclear weapons aimed at the other side, the Soviets from Cuba, the United States removing missiles from Turkey. The United States pledged never to invade Cuba again, a pledge that it maintained. And on that basis, the crisis was peacefully resolved. We know we came within a hair's breadth of nuclear war, actually, another long story. Even after the agreement was reached, a disabled nuclear submarine almost mistakenly and accidentally, in a way, triggered a nuclear war. So after those events, Kennedy and Khrushchev realized they had to do more than simply step back from the abyss. They had to pursue actual peaceful coexistence. And in 1963, they negotiated the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Now, what Kennedy did was, first of all, understand pragmatically what kind of deal could be reached. He understood that a deal could be reached that would be in the mutual interest of both parties, and he pragmatically negotiated that. He did something else absolutely remarkable, which is why I wrote the book, by the way. He made a public explanation of peace to the American people, even a peace campaign in the summer of 1963. He gave a famous speech on June 10, 1963, called the Peace Speech, which I encourage everyone to listen to. It's one of the most remarkable speeches of modern history. After that, he embarked for Europe. That's when he appeared at the Berlin Wall, when he spoke to the Irish Parliament and so forth. He bolstered his backing in those weeks by public appeal. Then he faced opposition to this deal from his own Joint Chiefs of Staff. And they testified in a very unpleasant way to the Senate that, well, this is all very dangerous. You can't trust the Soviets and so forth. And Kennedy went on a public tour in the United States explaining it's no miracle, nothing is sure in this world, but this is the best bet. In the end, the Senate overwhelmingly ratified the treaty. That's statesmanship. Tragically, there's an endnote or a coda to this. Kennedy was killed a few weeks after that. You know, for a long time in my life, knowing a lot about this, I didn't take a stand on what actually happened, but I'd say in the last 15 years of very extensive reading and files being released and even new files released in recent months, I'm pretty convinced the CIA took him out and took him out because of his peace initiative. And I think it is James Angleton who bears the most responsibility for this. And it is arguably true that every president since then has been a hostage to the CIA and to the American deep state, and that the lesson of statesmanship that I just explained, maybe it's no lesson. Maybe the lesson is keep your head down or you'll get knocked off. The truth is, and here's the point that I'm making, Trump probably, no one can guess, but probably would like this war to stop. He'd probably like to say that whole NATO thing, that was stupid. That was some failed gambit. He'd like to say this was Biden's war, even though, in fact, by the way, it was Obama's war, Trump's war, Biden's war, and Trump's war again. Yes. This is a deep state war. He knows that all of that would be subject to attack. He'd be called an appeaser. Munich, 1938. You know, you tell the truth in the United States and you're attacked by idiots like Lindsey Graham or fools like Richard Blumenthal. I mean, these are just terribly ignorant people. Lindsey Graham, I call him the stupidest senator in the whole Senate. But in any event, yeah, he'd be attacked. He'd be attacked by Starmer because Britain is Russophobic to the core, always has been since 1840. Britain is even crazier than the United States because it has the same hegemonic aspirations and memories and nostalgia, I would say, and it's nothing right now in terms of global power, but it thinks it is one. So Starmer would jump up and down, and Merz would jump up and down, and Macron would jump up and down. And the job of the president would be, now this is the point, a statesman would not only make the deal, but he'd explain it. And you know what? If he explained to the American people, extending NATO was a gambit. It was against a promise that was explicitly made to Gorbachev and to Yeltsin back in 1990, 91, and 92. It was a bad idea. We knew it was dangerous all along. Our top diplomats told us that. George Kennan told us that. Jack Matlock told us that. Bill Burns told us that. All of them said the same thing. We knew it, but we thought we could get away with it because Russia was weak. Well, they played the poker hand. They bluffed. They raised the stakes. They lost. So now we're ending this particular game. If he explained that, the American people would stand up and cheer because this would be truth. It would make sense to them. He would explain clearly what he's doing, and he would win a battle against an idiot like Lindsey Graham. Not even close. But he doesn't do that. Why? Two reasons. One, maybe three reasons. One, he's incompetent. That's a pretty good guess. Kennedy was not incompetent. Kennedy was gifted and became even more gifted in the final year of his life. Second, he's afraid that he's politically cowardly. Or third, quite possibly, and it's part of the incompetence, perhaps he doesn't understand what real politics is. Real politics is not true social messages or threats to others. It's actually, in a country like the United States, it's actually engaging with the people. It is. It sounds naive, but it's true. If he wants to win this fight against Lindsey Graham and against Palantir and against the military-industrial complex and against the CIA, he has to take the case to the people. And if he did, he'd win. Subject to that last footnote that I mentioned earlier. Maybe he's just afraid. Maybe that's why it's so hard to make peace, because we are not really a democracy in the United States. We're not really a republic. We're really a military state dressed up with elections. But if the presidents don't have the guts to make peace, then what we are really is a garrison state. We're just what Dwight Eisenhower said we would be when Dwight Eisenhower gave his farewell message on January 17th, 1961. The military-industrial complex runs our country. That's the real issue here. Now, how much Trump understands, how much he doesn't understand, who knows? But if he wants to win this thing, he has to make an agreement with Putin, but he has to explain it to the American people, not prevaricate, not cut the corners, not make a threat like he always does to show what a tough guy he is, but explain this was an idea that really went sour, a typical US CIA idea, a deep state idea. It goes back to the 1990s. It goes back to 1992, in fact, and it was the beginning implementation of it was 1994. So this is Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump 1, Biden, and Trump 2. This is not any particular president. This is a long-term policy of the U.S. that has gone terribly awry.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier this grand chessboard that Brzezinski outlined, and the Trump administration, as it finds itself very much mired still in the Ukraine conflict, it's also made moves. I know you've traveled to India recently. I know you've traveled to China recently. And while Trump is extending the tariff pause, or the, I guess, escalated tariff pause for another 90 days on China, he has caught a lot of flack for escalating secondary tariffs, as he's calling them, on India. And all of this revolves around the Ukraine conflict, at least in terms of how the Trump administration is outlining it. But there's this larger development happening in the world, Professor Sachs, that this Ukraine conflict falls under. Could you talk about the changing world and how this is influencing and maybe pressuring this military industrial complex, this military state that runs the U.S. to keep chugging along in this lost war in Ukraine?
We are in the midst of one of the most profound changes of geopolitics in many centuries, actually, because I think it's right to say that starting in 1492 and 1498 with the voyages of Columbus and da Gama, and with the beginning of European ascendancy up to around 1700, and then from 1700 to around 2000 with the fact of European global dominance, a world in which the West was ascendant and then dominant for centuries has ended. It ended around the year 2000. China's remarkable economic success, made of very hard work and very smart economic policies, was the single most decisive element in ending the Western dominance. But the real story of ending the Western dominance was that after 2 world wars, Europe, in its exhaustion and its moral exhaustion, gave up, either relinquished or by defeat in war, its colonies all over the world. And with independence of these countries came at least the beginnings of economic development, and especially of mass literacy, the spread of science and technology. And China became the poster child of rapid economic development on this basis from 1980 onward. Now, all of that means that we're in a multipolar world now. China's a great power. The United States cannot defeat China. It couldn't even fight a war with China successfully in China's neighborhood, even though the U.S. Seems to plan for one right now related to Taiwan. India is a great power by my calculation, not everybody's, but I believe it's already a great power. It's got a major economy. By purchasing power standards, it's the 3rd largest in the world. It's got a very sophisticated scientific and technological and professional class. It's a nuclear power and so forth. Russia is obviously a great power, whether the United States likes it or not. It's not the 3rd-rate power that Brzezinski envisions. It's the world's largest landmass, 17 million square kilometers, vast resource base, incredibly skilled technological workforce, and so forth, and a very strong military, 6,000 nuclear warheads. All of this means we're in a different kind of world from the world that the United States believed we would have at the end of the Soviet Union in December 1991. When the Soviet Union went down, which had been the aim of the American strategists during the Cold War, they said now it's a unipolar world. And in the unipolar world, the US dominates. There was a remaining task, which was to break Russia apart as well. Brzezinski opined that maybe Russia would become a loose confederation of three states, a European Russia, a Siberian Russia, and an East Asian Russia. Okay, these are the kind of fantasies and dreams of these strategists. But the idea was the U.S. was unipolar. Well, the U.S. is not the unipolar power. It's not the hegemon. It faces many other powers. The U.S. cannot impose its will. It can't impose its will on Russia. It cannot impose its will on China. It cannot impose its will on India. It can't impose its will on Brazil. So I've named 4 of the 5 original BRICS countries where Trump has gone after them in recent weeks to try to bring them to their knees. Lula, president of Brazil, put it most clearly. He said, "We don't need an emperor." Thank you. And Brazil is not caving. India is not caving. This extra 25% tariff on India is such a profound miscalculation of American foreign policy you can't even imagine. Within a few days, it has opened the eyes across India to the mythology that India was going to be the great partner of the U.S. against China. I always told them, it's stupid. Don't believe
I've
that.
seen you on Indian media.
Yeah.
Yes, say that same thing. Continue.
I was telling them for years, are you kidding? You think the U.S. is going to side with you and that you should join the Quad against China and so forth? This is ridiculous. I told them, make good relations with China. Then you're 40% of the world population. The two of you can make the multilateralism at the UN really work. You can make the new world order based on international law. Don't play the U.S. game. Well, in any event, they doubted me for a while. I think a lot of the Indian leaders, they like me, but they thought I was too sardonic about my own country. But Trump pulled it off. Within 48 hours, he convinced them entirely. President Modi's off to see President Xi Jinping. President Modi spoke with President Lula. President Modi is going to be hosting President Putin. It all happened within a few days because they understand what this is all about now.
Yeah. Yes, Professor Sachs, I know we are running short on time with you. Any final comments you have about this current moment before I let you go?
Well, let me just say, we don't know what's going to happen in Alaska, but we should hope that it is a pleasant meeting. We should understand that there's more at stake between the two countries than only Ukraine, although Ukraine's a big deal. There's the nuclear arms control. There is reestablishing normal diplomacy. There's actually the chance of reestablishing economic relations. So I'd say first that even if Ukraine isn't fully sorted out, there could be progress. I'm hoping for a pleasant, mutually respectful meeting. It would serve both countries well to have that. And if Trump has the gumption to tell the truth about Ukraine, that yes, it was a gambit gone wrong, we could actually see peace there as well. And Zelensky and Macron and Merz and Starmer, they probably understand that if Trump tells it straight, the war's over, whether they like it or not, and that there should then be a peace agreement, not just the chest thumping of the Europeans that will never agree to anything. If the United States and Russia rightly, not appeasement, but rightly agree to sensible terms to end what was a U.S. misadventure, then the others will have to come along, and that will be the right outcome.
Professor Sachs, it was great to be with you again. Please take care, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Wonderful. Let's do that. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Everyone, we have plenty of show to come, including, I'll bring him on now, my next guest. He is Patrick Henningsen. He's a geopolitical analyst and a journalist. He is the founder of 21st Century Wire. Patrick, good to be with you.
It's great to be with you, Danny.
Great. Well, how about we begin then with the big news that everyone's been talking about regarding Ukraine. It comes as we know that Putin and Trump are going to engage in what are likely going to be many more talks than just one. And we've just had a major battlefield development I want to pull up here. We have Pokrovsk front collapsing, where I'm reading more than 11 kilometers now of advancement in this axis. And here you see the map. It's looking very, very bad as Russian forces are essentially moving to not only encircle Pokrovsk in the Dobropilia area, but also the Konstantinivka area. I'm butchering those names. Patrick, how about you react to the latest developments, not just on the battlefield, but they are shaping this overall environment where we have Donald Trump. He's saying that Putin reached out to him, but many are surmising that it's the collapse of Ukraine that is actually pressuring the United States to come to the table once again. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I'm looking at it a little bit differently than a lot of people. I'm looking at it more reverse, that the Donald Trump is called this meeting. Clearly, why would the U.S. call any ceasefire? Or what? Just look at the beginning of the Trump administration. Every single, from Gaza to Iran to the attack on Iran to the various, impasses with Ukraine, at every single juncture, the U.S. or its allies will call for, a meeting or negotiations to buy time. That's because in the absence of any articulated policy change, which in the case of Ukraine, we see nothing. We see absolutely nothing. This is what I've been saying for, the last couple of weeks to different pundits and on my show as well, is that I don't see anything said or articulated that leads me to believe that the United States, that the Trump administration has any better understanding of the conflict whereby they would be able to sit down and agree with terms with Russia, so there would be some meeting of the minds. And if you don't have that, I can't imagine how they could. Russia's not going to give any concessions, obviously, because they're winning. Why would they? And what on earth could the United States bargain with, just based on what we've heard and which has been said vocally and rhetorically? It absolutely is not compatible with the Russian demands that we've seen. Now, with Trump, it's all shrouded in mystery. They're saying, Witkoff, special envoy, has been sent, and Russia's agreed on terms, and they're offering something the United States is interested in, vice versa. Russia's position hasn't changed. It hasn't changed since December 2021. The only thing that's changed are the facts on the ground in Ukraine, and the fact that Russia has basically gained some new regions for the Russian Federation. So that's the only real material change, which is not in favor of Ukraine or the United States. So again, less leverage, less bargaining position from the U.S. So Trump has nothing. But for Trump, it's important to go public, to look like the United States is in the driving seat, that they're dictating the pace of events, and that Trump has leverage, and he's going to get a good deal because he's known as the art of the deal guy. But there's no deal here for the United States. There's nothing for the Trump administration. And I'll get to some of the details of this in a minute. Hold on for a second. Sorry about that. But so that's what I've understood from this. I don't see anything that leads us to believe that there's going to be anything new here. What I see is the U.S. buying time. They're trying to buy time in order to change facts on the ground, because they believe that they can change facts on the ground. But the reality is they can't, but they believe they can if they. So what's the surprise? What's going to be the big reveal? And the big reveal is going to be what happened before the last negotiations at Istanbul, and what happened after.
Yeah. Yep. Surprise attack.
So this ultimatum came from Trump. Trump gave an ultimatum to the Iranians, 60 days. On the 61st day, there was a sneak attack. After the Istanbul agreement, Russia sent a full delegation. What did the U.S. do? And the British and the Ukrainians, they stabbed them in the back. They did not only in a sneak attack, but an egregious attack on Russia's nuclear deterrent. That's a major geopolitical provocation. That's enough to say all bets are off. We're going to war. Okay, that's what the U.S. did. That's the track record. Now the question is Russia that stupid? Is Russia that stupid, or who is playing who here? And if that's the case, is Russia setting the U.S. and Ukraine up for a fall? Because all Russia has to do actually is run the clock out, you see. So, and we've also said this for a very long time, is that the timeline politically for Russia is long. Okay, they have the balance of resolve, they have the strategic depth, they have the balance of force on their side. They have all these things on their side. And politically, Vladimir Putin's under no pressure. There's no election coming up. There's no House election, by-election coming up in 2026 or whatever. There's no, Republican House and Senate. That's an issue in the U.S. Trump's MAGA base is fracturing. There are all sorts of problems there. He's got to get buy-in to get other parts of his agenda pushed through. Russia doesn't have any problems like that. So what's the reality of the situation is that we have the Ukrainians, and Zelensky in particular, is on a very short leash politically, and the U.S. is on a short leash. The British are desperate. The Europeans are desperate, because if Russia's even seen to win, this is an absolute abject defeat for Brussels, for NATO, for the collective ego of Europe and the UK. So and again, if Donald Trump could negotiate a deal, he cannot guarantee that Zelensky and the far right in Ukraine are going to be on side with it. He can't vouch for the British. He can't vouch for the Europeans. They're already dog whistling attacks.
Yeah.
So he's got nothing. He can do nothing with Russia other than get a photo op in Alaska, a handshake, some headlines. And I think Russia's well aware of this. And, or have Zelensky jump out of the closet in his green t-shirt, say, "I'm here, Putin. How, this injustice won't stand." I mean, do it like some kind of a press stunt. That's the only risk of having it on U.S. soil, is that Zelensky could show up, or be in town, or, be sort of praying there at the airport, freezing in Alaska, although it's warm now in August. I mean, I don't know. I can't see what Russia would gain, but then I'm like, if Russia can play this, run the clock out, or go with Trump with some kind of an agreement, which the Russians know that the Ukrainians are not going to accept. And if Zelensky is seen to veto a deal, at least that's going to cause political instability in Ukraine, which is already unstable, and that's to Russia's advantage. So Putin and Moscow could very well be playing Trump, very well be playing Trump here, because just the fundamentals of this, according to what Washington's wanting people to think, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and that's why I named this Putin has cornered Trump in many ways by all those facts that you have laid out without really having to. It's not loud. It doesn't have to be loud. It's the facts on the ground, as you said. And I think one of the things that people don't understand about this trap that Trump is in, and that any U.S. president would be in, is that really the only way to make peace is to assert that you have total dominance over this proxy, which then blows up the whole game. It blows up the whole war. You have to, the United States would have to settle with Russia, essentially expose itself, as it's been trying really hard to do, expose itself as the actual puppet master and not simply the mediator, which it is posing right now. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, from that point of view, the Trump administration is just basically, pretending to do diplomacy, and that's what Steve Witkoff is. I call him the Dellboy of diplomacy. He's like, if you're British, you know what that means, but just basically a chancer, somebody who's just kind of showing up in the suit, the meter and the greeter kind of thing at the casino, but doesn't run the casino. And he doesn't really have any depth of understanding of anything. He couldn't even name the Donbass regions in an interview with Tucker Carlson. That was, his big coming out interview. He couldn't even name the Donbass regions. And I'm saying, okay, so that's the de facto Secretary of State. All right. So they're BSing their way through it. Okay. So there's like zero chance that they are able to grasp and are going to deliver anything. Because if the people involved, like Trump and Witkoff, don't really have a fundamental understanding, to them, this is, and the way they've articulated this publicly, and they may think differently behind the scenes, but that doesn't really work in politics, especially in this situation. Like, whatever your knowledge is, you've got to articulate that publicly. But to them, it's a real estate dispute. It's a land and a border dispute. No, it's much, much deeper than that. This is a national security issue. It's an existential issue. This is an extension in many ways of the Cold War. This is about collective security. It's about in the indivisibility of security. If I say security indivisibility to Donald Trump, is he going to understand what that means? Is he going to have any idea, or is that going to go like right over his head? And if that's the case, then this guy can't do anything. He's not going to deliver anything. If you put a bunch, a team of baboons, and you can say, build a rocket and take us to the moon, I can bet you they're not going to do it. They might do after a couple million years and enough bananas. But so if the people that we see that don't even understand or know what the Minsk peace process was, the fact that it was codified as a UN Security Council Resolution 2202, if they don't understand that, why that broke down and what it led to and what was going on behind the scenes, if they don't understand any of this, then there's no way that team of baboons is going to take us to the moon with a peace deal. It's impossible. They're out of their depth. So if that's who's in charge, unless there's a secret team of geniuses behind the scenes that we don't see, like a secret super Sherpa team of diplomats, I don't think they're there. It's like, so I mean, there's nothing's going to happen here. So I think from that point of view, Trump is and painted himself into such a corner. He's raised expectations to such a degree as he came into office, was elected on stopping this and every other conflict. And he's done just the opposite. So now he can't really deliver on any of that. So now he's stuck with plan B. And then he doesn't even know, what plan B is or what it can do, because the plan A was arm the Ukrainians and wear down the Russians and overextend Russia. And then, eventually the Putin regime would collapse from within. That was the Democrat plan. And Trump said, well, no, we're going to do it differently. But he's kind of back to that default in terms of what's actually happening with policy. But then all the rhetoric, oh yeah, we're gonna bring this thing to an end. You know, it's just he's saying, oh, they're killing each other. They're killing each other. You know, no, you're killing Russians. U.S. is killing Russians. British are killing Russians. NATO's killing Russians through Ukraine with all of our gear and kit and intelligence and whatnot. Russia's not killing any Americans. Russia's not killing any Europeans. They're not killing any British, not official soldiers.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, if there are those mercenaries running around,
men, NATO's little green men running around in Ukraine. So that means they're co-belligerents. So you can't, if you're a co-belligerent, you can't pretend to, referee negotiations. It's impossible. It's not going to work. Russia knows all this. I really don't think Russia takes the Trump administration seriously, but they'll give him. They've learned to help him pump himself up, and Russia's actually the one who is going to get time to change facts on the ground, as you just showed with the military advance and the fact that by the time they're faffing about for the next 2 months, Russia will be all the way to the Dnieper River. And then we're getting close to surrender terms at that point. If they decide they want to keep fighting, that's going to be difficult. Because once Russia reaches the Dnieper River, then potentially they could cut off Kharkiv supply lines. Potentially they could make an advance on Kiev at some point as a symbolic advance. But Russia also understands something else, is that given enough time, they could easily agree on an interim deal. And they know that the political situation is so tenuous in Ukraine, especially in Odessa and places like this, that parts of Ukraine will collapse from within, that there will be resistance in Ukraine. Russia's tracking all of this. Anti-Zelensky resistance, disgruntled military, even Nazis that want Zelensky out, Nazis allying with pro-Russian dissidents. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's what's going to happen over time. Russia knows this. They'll play that game out 10 years. Fine, draw the lines where they are today. We'll see how they end up in 5 years. And that's the reality. Because they know when the Zelensky and the Ukrainian armed forces collapse, compared to where they were, in terms of cohesion 2 years ago, then all of these areas that are dominated by Russian-speaking, or what they call ethnic Russian populations, the hold that Kiev and the West will have over these regions becomes very tenuous, and that's a game changer. And that can only happen over time. Time's on Russia's side. It's not on Kiev's side. It's not on Washington's side. It's not on Brussels' side.
Yeah, and I think, there is this, I think it's a very intentional. Some see it as incidental, but we see the Trump administration. Here's Donald Trump already predicting, essentially, that these talks may not end up with anything, as you said. This is what he said directly about these talks coming up.
Go and see the parameters. Now, I may leave and say, good luck. And then at the end, I may say this. There are those that...
So he may leave and say good luck and that this won't be settled at all. But then you have this dynamic that you just spoke about that is now finding and surfacing just without the astute analysis in mainstream media. The European Union, Zelensky, no concessions, none. They're never going to accept anything that might come out of U.S.-Russia talks. And to me, I believe that this is all intentional. It's not incidental. It's not simply that the Europe is so angry with the United States and Zelensky cannot believe what's going on. I think that there is a lot of attempts to sow plausible deniability so that now Europe and Zelensky can look like they are actually the ones who are running the show And that essentially allows the United States to keep doing what it's doing and continue the war. But I want to know your assessment of this dynamic, because it's showing up on our screens as Europe versus Trump, Zelensky versus Trump, whenever there are any kind of hints that the U.S. is just talking to Russia, let alone anything coming out of it.
Yeah, they're panicking, and so that's another way to look at it. Is that the U.S. is basically creating a situation, route up the Europeans, put them on high alert, put Zelensky and his regime and his project, which is the bagman, to bring the cash and the weapons to Ukraine, and he's putting that basically in jeopardy. And so that does, but only if, Danny, if the policy is for the U.S. to step back and have Europe take over this debacle and have the U.S. play a secondary role. But there's no way the U.S. can ever play a secondary role. They're going to be playing a primary role on ISR, on defense, on intelligence, and geopolitically, this is a nuclear power, Russia. So there's no way the U.S. can take a back seat. So I really don't buy. I have a hard time buying this J.D. Vance, MAGA position. Well, let's let the Europeans handle this. Because if you look at where the money is going, and I always follow the money, and the money. The American money is into NATO expansion, undoubtedly. From especially looking at Scandinavia, 47 new bases in Scandinavia, Denmark, around the horn, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, 47. That'll be a bigger military. Yeah, that's NATO. Yeah. It's effectively NATO plus the Arctic. So this is a bigger expansion than even the Middle East. Okay, so if that's where the money is, then how on earth is the United States receding? So I really don't, if you're just going to follow the headlines, as many people are content to do when they heard about this meeting, that, oh, look, this is it. Something's going to happen here. Trump wants to end this thing. I just can't trust this administration's going to do what it's going to say or means what it's saying at any time. I just can't, because they've let us down every single time. So, and I don't see any changes in the rhetoric. I don't see any epiphany. There's no epiphany like when you're saying, "Oh, wow, this is a change. Look at this attitude change here." They're actually seeing reality. We've had 7-8 months now. There's none of that. So I don't. That means the policy can't be changing, and the policy is encirclement of Russia, weakening Russia, ultimately defeating Russia. Or making Russia a subservient client entity to the West, and then breaking it up, and then taking Georgia, and then, adding Georgia and Azerbaijan to NATO, Moldova. Moldova is a perfect example. So what they're going to do, and this is why Trump is just. I mean, I don't want to use hyperbole, because it's just the Democrats have been doing this for so long with Trump.
Right. They make it about Trump. Yes, exactly.
But he is an idiot. I mean, let's just be honest. He's not that bright. He doesn't really. He's trying to BS his way through subject areas that clearly there's a plethora of experts, including his other statesmen, his counterparts, that are much more knowledgeable and articulate than him. And rather than being respectful and having smart advisors, he's surrounded himself with grifters and people that he trusts who don't know anything about anything. And they are trying to BS their way through the process, which is highly disrespectful. And it doesn't breed any confidence for the rest of us that are looking at this situation and saying this could really spin out of control very easily into a broader conflict, maybe even a nuclear standoff. And this guy's only in office for 3 years. I mean, Russia's just like, who's this clown? We just had Biden 7 months ago, and this clown's in. Look, he's worse than Biden. And who's the next clown going to be? Russia's like, who's the next clown going to be in 2028? Is it going to be Rubio? Who, and then what are we
Nightmares.
have to deal with then? I think almost
Yep.
like Russia's getting so thick-skinned with U.S. politics now that they're like, wow, we just have to play the game with the Americans and get on and do what we need to do. And it's going to be a tough grind, but
Right.
we're not going to be distracted or getting our hopes up that they're going to be able to sign in any treaty, much less ratify it in their respective legislatures in the West. I mean, come on. What are there? Imagine a treaty that's drawn up right now with Ukraine. How on earth would that ever get agreed on between the U.S., Europe, and the UK and Ukraine? What are the chances of that? And then once it's agreed in principle, what are the chances of that being codified by law in all the parliamentary legislatures? I mean, it's almost zero. So what are we left with? Status quo. And what are they going to do? Watch, Danny. They'll start to move more aggressively on the Romanian border front. They will start to move more aggressively via Moldova.
Yes, Moldova.
And also in the Baltics with the U.S. land commander for NATO. I think his name's Chris Donahue.
Yes.
He was at a conference. You probably saw this last week.
Right. We played it here. Yes.
Okay. And he's talking about Kaliningrad. And we have already drawn up a plan to, all the area denial systems that the Russians have. We're going to take all those out. We're going to do that really quick. And it's going to be done this. And then we're going to do that. And this is a weak part for Russia. That's World War III talk right there. There's nuclear weapons in Kaliningrad. So like what kind of game are you guys playing here? Imagine the Russians publicly holding conferences, saying this kind of stuff publicly, the heads of the Russian defense, like, we think we found a weak spot here in Europe, and we're going to take that out in like 2 weeks. I mean, the arrogance of this, but the
to a
danger
nuclear power as well. To say that about a nuclear power is incredible. But continue.
Yeah. So there's no deal to be had. There's no deal to be had for the United States. I don't see it. And they're buying time. The British believe that they can buy time, that through drone swarms and some of the new tech they have and sabotage operations that are already planned, that they'll be able to really make life difficult for the Russians and maybe even assassinate the Russian leadership or whatever. It's in the British Defense Review. It's called Operation Kill Web. It's drone swarms. And Spider's Web was the sort of opening gambit for that. And they think that if they can draw this out for a couple of years through this tech, in much the way the Israelis have done in different ways with Hezbollah and the Iranians and so forth, that they'll be able to basically get what they want in the end. They're going to win through perseverance and dedication and focus on that one goal, which is regime change in Russia, and to sow chaos among the Russian ranks. And they think this is a winning formula, and they're not going to give up. I'm afraid to say they're not going to give up. And where's that going to lead us? Where's that going to lead? What's Russia going to do if it's existentially threatened on that level?
If it's not this war, Patrick, it'll be another one, and it could, as you intimated earlier, it could be nuclear. It could very well be, because, as you said, it's existential. And to appreciate this, what you've been saying, I think one really interesting thing, first of all, a lot of people are scared about Vladimir Putin even traversing to the United States because of how bad things have gotten. When I get messages, why would Putin do this? They're scared because of that precedent which was set during Operation Spiderweb, where negotiations were about to occur between Russia and Ukraine, and then Ukraine, with the U.S.'s backing and, of course, the West's backing, committed a heinous violation of Russia's everything, international and of nuclear doctrine. So this is this is a really bad situation. But I think what the Trump administration, I want to play this for you, Pat. I think what the Trump administration has really exposed, I agree with you. It's when we talk about the intellect of someone like Donald Trump, when we say stupid, I'm not even looking at that as, going after Trump based on his personality characteristics. It's realizing that somebody like him, who literally does not care or know anything about what's going on in Ukraine, can be elevated to this level because he has people who are misadvising, manipulating, in order to bring him political success and therefore bring the foreign policy blob political success as well. This is the game. And I want to play this short bit of Pete Hegseth, one of the grifters that you are referencing, because his messaging, they lie through their teeth all the time to us, but when they speak, it is meaningful in the sense that it really does expose what this is about if we're looking hard enough.
Already, President Trump has changed the game. He's created the conditions for a possible negotiated settlement, which is his goal from the beginning at a very complex battlefield. I don't think Vladimir Putin would be meeting unless he's felt that heat. And I think we can't. The president's laid out the parameters, and so is Steve Witkoff and others who are in the strength side of the peace through strength business. But on the negotiating side, there's going to be, could be land swaps. There's going to be concessions. No one's going to be happy.
But you see, it's constant talking points, and what they're communicating is Putin was feeling the heat, Russia's feeling the heat, so therefore we are on the strength of the peace through strength side, and this is supposed to communicate to us that we are in good hands despite everything that you are covering. So your reaction to this, Patrick?
Yeah, just it's one trope after another. Peace through strength, land swaps, Putin's feeling the heat. So the Fox News presenter is now basically come out full style, Pete Hegseth there, and falling back on talking points, which is what you do if you're in the U.S. mainstream media. You just fall back on tropes, talking points, and there's no strength. There's no strength. Trump is such a weak leader, and he's such a weak leader. You cannot be a strong leader. You cannot wield a strong hand in any negotiations internationally. This is not a casino in Atlantic City. No. We're talking about the game of nations, okay? All of your other skills, Donald, are irrelevant. They're not transferable to this situation because the depth we're talking about, the depth of this deal goes back hundreds of years. You have to understand that. You've got to allow that to permeate your below the surface of who you are, and you need to feel that history and really understand it in the way that historians, academics, career diplomats, veteran negotiators in international affairs understand. Okay, they really appreciate and understand these things, and only then can you go and understand only then can you put yourself in the position of the other side, of the other counterparty. That's what's required for this level. This is high wire act diplomacy. The requirements, the prerequisites for this type of engagement in international relations is so high. The pedigree is traditionally so high. We're talking about the past U.S. teams from Reagan, from Bush Sr., even Clinton, fluent in Russian. Some of the chief diplomats, the ones who are designing the deals, who are really putting it together and doing all of the closed-door meetings, they're fluent in Russia and probably 3 other languages. What about the Trump administration? What sort of caliber of persons do we have here? Not anything like that. So the deal, if there was a deal, that deal would be Russia would want sanctions lifted. Of course, that's something they're going to ask for. They're going to want that $320 billion in stolen Russian assets held in Euroclear in Belgium. They're going to want that. The money they've been threatening to give to Ukraine to pay for all the weapons and this and that. They're going to want an end to threats of destroying their tankers and their shadow fleet. They want to be able to sell oil and gas to Europe, to the world, They want to lift that price cap on Russian oil. They're going to want an absolute guarantee that there is no NATO membership for Ukraine in the future, and that NATO will stop trying to expand into the Caucasus and Central Asia. Full stop. That includes Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Moldova, you could say, but maybe they might give Moldova away on that. That's what Russia would be looking at initially from the U.S. Now, if the U.S. could deliver all of those things for Russia, and maybe they could, maybe even Trump could, but Russia's not going to give any serious concessions on their side. So what does this negotiation actually look like? Like, who is in the driving seat? It's not the United States. So, and that's the problem. It's political suicide for anyone in America like Pete Hegseth to go on there and say, my God, we're really behind the 8 ball on this, guys. I'm Pete Hegseth, defense secretary, and we are really in the you-know-what. Okay, we have really hit rock bottom here, and, we don't really have any answers. And, if we don't do X, Y, and Z, then I'm just going to resign. I'm going to fall on my sword. Like any self-respecting politician that wants to see a future of honor and credibility in their political future would have to threaten to resign at this point in order to shock the Trump administration into reality. But nobody's going to do that, because we know that's not the done thing these days. And that's for the Democrats as well. What happened to the Biden administration? A slow demise. You watched it. We saw it. That slow.
They all went along with it.
That disintegration of credibility right across the Democratic ranks.
Even the Bernie Sanderses, they just went along with it.
Everybody. It was so bad. Even Kamala Harris couldn't even distance herself from it when she took the baton from Biden, because there's nobody that, like, for instance, the perfect person that should resign would have been Tulsi Gabbard under the Trump administration over the Iran intelligence assessment thing. Perfect. And that would have set her up as probably the most credible politician. But no, in the 21st century, that's not allowed in politics. Bad for the career.
Down. There was, it was despicable.
So, that's not going to happen. And so what are we left with here? That it's just games. This is just headlines, getting from A to B politically, and who knows. But so America can think that it's going to sort of take a back seat and maybe allow the Europeans to come in and whatever. But do you trust the British and the Europeans that they're going to manage this properly? They're talking about, tripartite nuclear deterrence to take on the Russians. I mean, the Europeans, that could easily start a war that is going to end up dragging the Americans back in anyway, exactly like they did in the First and Second World War. That's the only thing you can bet on historically, is that left to their own devices, the Europeans are going to create a you-know-what show, and America will ultimately come in and save the day, and then manage the reconstruction or whatever the post-war situation is. Who wants to see that happen third time? I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe America does.
Maybe.
There's people in the Rand Corporation and the Heritage. They think that they can win a third world war, and not only win, they're going to profit and win bigly. That's how they're talking right now in Washington. Absolute insane.
Right.
Some of these people, and that we can have a limited nuclear exchange, and Russia's no way. It's like, why are we even talking like this? And even the best minds at Rand would never advocate for such a thing. But unfortunately, the Rand Corporation or these think tanks may push these policy papers out, but they're not the ones that are implementing them. Those are the politicians, unfortunately, in America. So the American deep state is kind of, I would still say, somewhat at war with the Trump administration, but happy that the military-industrial complex and this military Keynesianism, as they call it, as Jeffrey Sachs himself, I think, has used that word. They're happy that that's in the ascendancy right now, because that's a system they can control centrally, and they can run with that. And Trump's delivering that at the moment. So, where is the off ramp here for the U.S.? It's honest question.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about how all of this, Patrick, the military Keynesianism, the mutual cooperation between Trump and the deep state, what it is producing that perhaps is unintended. And I want to first play arch neocon. Some people have surmised that Lindsey Graham, given his deep relationship with the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, and the like, is actually running Trump's foreign policy, is in effect the Secretary of Defense himself. But here's what he said, and I want everyone to pay attention to what he is saying in particular, not only about Ukraine, but the way that Trump has approached the larger world order.
But the reason Putin is in Alaska is because President Trump announced he was going to sell weapons to Europe to help Ukraine, and that rattled Putin. But he put a 50% tariff, President Trump did, on India for buying Russian oil. He went after the second largest purchaser of Russian oil that keeps the war machine going in Russia, India, with a 50% tariff. That's why Putin's going to Alaska. Peace through strength.
So essentially, everyone in the Trump administration and, of course, the Lindsey Grahams of the world are championing how Donald Trump has been going after India, but really the rest of BRICS too. We know that Brazil was slapped with heavy tariffs for different reasons, but actually what's happening is that BRICS is tightening their alliance. And I just want to highlight it here that, Lula da Silva is held a call with Xi Jinping and said they're going to defend multilateralism, and that there's going to be further cooperation among all the BRICS powers against directly Trump's tariffs. But then you also have India, who's supposed to be a key cog for the United States to stop the rise of China. India's rise is supposed to be the U.S.'s biggest weapon. And here we have, after this 50% tariffs were threatened onto India, now Prime Minister Narendra Modi, is going to China for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. And he's also going to meet with Xi Jinping. And even the Indian media, no friend of China, says this is signaling a thaw in ties. And this isn't even getting to how, of course, Russia is a big momentum driver in BRICS and has not backed down at all on assisting all of these countries with these aims. So talk about this development as it has transpired, because this changing world has driven Trump crazy and is influencing not only Ukraine policy, but apparently the entirety of the U.S. empire's overall approach to the world order.
Well, this first of all, this idea that that the Trump administration has, been using tariffs as sanctions, basically, the weaponization of tariffs and using them as sanctions, using them to punish countries for behavior, and can anyone point to anywhere where this has been successful? Can anyone point to the improved economic performance of the United States before Trump launched his tariff wars 3 or 4 months ago? What do they call it? Liberation Day? Is that what the Trump administration is? This is Liberation Day, J.D. Vance and everybody. Liberation from what? Liberation from a healthy, functioning economy? Liberation from healthy, mutually beneficial bilateral relations with so many world partners? Is that what you're liberating yourself from? Because that's exactly the reality of the situation. And this idea that you can threaten people in order to gain concessions, or that you can threaten them to force them to the table, that doesn't work in international relations, and it's been proven. This has been gamed out. If you read The Sanctions Paradox by Daniel Dresner, or any of the academic work on sanctions, it's been so well modeled over the years. Every single one of these negotiations has been modeled, and every single time when a more powerful country is threatening another country with punishment, and there's an expectation of future punishment, the level of compliance is very low. India is not going to comply with the United States. They're not, because the US and Europe have created a perfect capitalist situation by putting this forced price cap on Russian oil to punish Putin. And all it's done is created this vibrant, dynamic market for Russian oil from enterprising countries that are willing to package and resell that oil back to Europe and still make a profit on it. So India's doing brilliantly in the way that Germany was doing brilliantly with cheap and reliable Russian gas before the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines by NATO, and benefiting economically from that. And then any surplus, they're selling on to Europe. So they've got this lovely carrying trade with Russian oil, that India is being perfectly capitalistic. This is the free market at work. This is like Republicans and the MAGA, we're pro free market. The free market's working. Whenever government gets involved in trying to engineer the economy, and globally, you can see, I'm talking about Washington and Brussels in this case, they've created a huge opening in the market, which a lot of other people are taking advantage of. So they created the situation themselves because they felt, oh, we need to punish Russia. And this is how we're going to do it. But, oh my gosh, other countries are benefiting from this. Now we need to punish them. We need to punish them. You can't go to war economically with India. India's supply chains are so intertwined with the United States and U.S. allies. India is an integral part of the global economy. And they're from a technological level, even there's U.S. military contractors that outsource significant, work and components to firms in India. Plus, we have labor exchanges, high-skilled labor exchanges. Silicon Valley totally relies on India, and vice versa. So forget it. And there's tons of industries that fall into that category. So it's just not credible that, these threats that, oh, we're going to do this. I really don't think the Indians are taking it that seriously. And as you say, Danny, it's opened the door for closer and more kind of palpable benefits of BRICS. It's not just theoretical now. The U.S. is driving BRICS. Trump is driving BRICS. Trump has done more to develop BRICS that he should get an award. Trump should be given an award by BRICS. They should have a ceremony, invite Donald Trump for helping to, really turbocharge BRICS and bring it to levels it hadn't previously been able to attain. Donald Trump deserves full credit for that. He should get like a BRICS medal, yes. Something. They should bow the head, and Xi Jinping should put that.
They could give him the that mock currency that that people made a whole big fuss about. Give him that little fake banknote.
Yeah, give him that, and give him like a Union Pay card or something like that.
Yes.
So I think, it's just they don't have really any appreciation for how the world works, and I always thought this was a huge problem I used to think that Republicans generally in the U.S., they're very in touch on domestic issues, and very, very much they've got their finger on the pulse of a lot domestically, and they're really good in many cases, as Trump has demonstrated with messaging domestically. He's managed to, bring on a whole bunch of working class voters to help put him into office twice. Okay. And he did very well in 2020, even though he didn't make it over the finish line. And always thought, but then when you get 20 miles off U.S. territory or waters, that's when their conservative Republican IQ plummets like 100 points. Like anything outside U.S. territory or waters is just completely nebulous, kind of blurry theme park, of the globe. But Democrats, when they've been in power, especially in the neoliberal era, they've become very out of touch domestically, but are still au fait with internationalism. so much so that they understand. The Obama administration is a good example of this. John Kerry and so forth. They can wheel and deal with the Europeans, and they know how to move through the world. But so these two opposites of Republicans and Democrats. But now Democrats' IQs are plummeting internationally as well. So America is in such a diabolical situation as an international actor that they're having a real problem interfacing with the world. And Donald Trump is like presiding over the real collapse of U.S. credibility and as a hegemon, and the ability to, it's a perfect example is, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but J.D. Vance, when he came in, remember the Munich Security Conference?
Yes.
And he was like kind of grandstanding. So a couple weeks into the administration, sounding really cool and tough, and Europe's got to do this, and the UN's got to do that, and that. And then we're gonna nuke USAID and all these UN programs and the World Trade Organization. Who needs that? We're gonna do tariffs, and we're gonna show everybody who's boss, right? These people have no appreciation that the entire U.S. empire was built by gamifying the multilateral institutions after World War II. That's where the U.S. had a stealth empire, which they constructed and managed through all these institutions, through globalization. That's where the U.S. power, and that's how they maintained the dollar, and it's how the dollar adapted to changes in the global economy and remain the world reserve currency. But of course, the price of that is obviously running up this indefinite national deficit and deficit spending. But that's still the source of U.S. power. And these geniuses come in, and with the Trump administration especially, saying, "Oh no, we don't need, it's America first, and bring the drawbridges up, fortress America. We don't need the world. Let Europe defend itself." The U.S. provided collective defense for Europe and the Pacific for a reason. And it wasn't just about, protecting Europe from the wild Kim regimes or, whatever. No, it was financial. This was a global financial system, and euro dollars and the government of Japan have helped to subsidize and buttress the value and viability of the U.S. dollar. This is that whole system. And if you read texts of international relations from the Second World War, from Morgenthau all the way to the present, they all understand this. This is just kind of obvious. It's obvious in the subtext. And then these guys come along, and it's almost like this IQ collapsed in Washington. There's people that actually don't really, they talk like America's the greatest country in the world. America is the most dominant country in the world. We have the greatest military in the world. And they have no idea what actually undergirds American power. The bankers know this. Wall Street knows this. You better believe it. The IMF know it. Everyone at the World Bank knows it. But nobody in Washington seems to know this now, and that is so bizarre. And I'm wondering if we're in the idiocracy now, and this is how it all ends. I really, I don't want to see this U.S. empire continue, obviously, because it's done such tremendous damage to the world. I'm very much a fan of the multipolar prospects that could offer something positive for everybody, including America, right? But these people cannot understand that they're actually destroying the basis of American power. I find it almost, it's funny in a certain way, but it's really tragic in another way, because this sloppy, punch-drunk, hegemon in his last throes, it can do tremendous damage to not just America, but the rest of the world in the process. That's the dangerous part.
Yeah. And I think your observation about how the two parties of the uniparty, of the one party state in the US, how they are able to win over domestic audiences, but yet are so almost laughably idiotic on foreign policy, I think speaks to the consensus, because on domestic issues, they can play at divisions, they can market and focus group what can manipulate voters into voting for whichever party is going to essentially stick them in the back and go against their interests. But when it comes to international issues, there's just total consensus, and that consensus, I think, is born about in this panic on this new rising new order, the multipolar world that you reference. And and it's just a matter of form. So Donald Trump goes tariff crazy, but yet every time he does, and now we're hearing huge criticisms of him from all sides of the political aisle and the establishment, because he constantly has to push back this tariff war, trade war on China in particular, while he goes after India, while he goes after Brazil, while he goes after more friendly kind of partners. He is constantly pushing back these tariffs. But then there's just the reality of, well, it's both stupidity and it's also ineffectiveness, because China's trade surplus, which Donald Trump constantly says, we're going to stop China from this, we're going to stop all of these countries from having trade surpluses with us, we are in the deficit. Well, it's actually just continuously rising because the more that you economically go to war, the more that a country like China, with this sophisticated supply chain, and India, it needs to get more sophisticated. So maybe it needs a little bit of the kind of China model. But all of these countries, they're going to look inward, and then they're going to look outward towards others where they can build even greater of a surplus, because their supply chains are more sophisticated than their partners and players in Latin America, Asia, Africa. That's just how this is. And so what's astounding about this is that, one, it's not effective and it always blows back. But two, it does expose this consensus of all forms, all out war. And it eventually leads to what we see in Ukraine, which is a disastrous constant possibility of nuclear war. And then, of course, what's happening in West Asia, which we haven't even gotten to, where it's just a complete and utter disaster, both for the Palestinians in the region. And we hear rumblings of another war with Iran because of BRICS. And this is I think this is a big theme. So your reactions, your final analysis on this overall situation as we move into all of these flashpoints even deeper in the days and weeks to come.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. and the British mainly, because that's who drives NATO. It's Anglo-American. Okay, U.S. is number one, Britain's number two, and the Europeans are there as playing supporting roles. Okay, so it's really what's coming from Washington and London, and looking at Ukraine, the priorities of the Anglo-Americans, the Anglo-American Empire, if you want to call it, extend that, from the British Empire to the American Empire. The priorities aren't that different than they were 100 or 200 years ago. It's very similar. But the problem is 100 and 200 years ago, you didn't have the level of development that you have in Asia right now. You see, the world's different. While the Anglo-Americans may be thinking very similar, they may be trying to, manage the Eurasian landmass in very similar ways in terms of disrupting the Silk Road and other efforts, or the Belt and Road today, or other overland efforts that may join Eastern Europe to Asia, that may join the Middle East to Asia, and might join Eastern and Central Europe to the Middle East and Central Asia. So their priority has always been to disrupt that. And the reason is through various, means of establishing maritime trade routes and maritime law. The U.S. and Britain have dominated the seas and all those important geopolitical choke points, which they control or their client states control. And by doing that, they're able to manage the global political economy. But it's not, the world's changed. So they're the same, but the world's changed. What's east is different. And so human capital is growing in the east. Populations are growing. But the birth rate in Europe and North America, in terms of, especially white Europeans, it's fallen off a cliff. And it's not coming back, not for the foreseeable future. So they're in a population and a demographic collapse. And so that means they're in a human capital collapse. And the only policy that can plug that gap is immigration, which is contrary to popular belief, especially in the right wing. It's completely organized and engineered at the highest level of state, at the highest level of Wall Street and big tech, and at the transnational corporate level. This is what strategists at the top banks, those are the problems that they are tasked to solve at Cantor Fitzgerald and all these big institutions. That's the stuff they talk about. And what the version we get as plebs in the political pantomime is, oh my God, here come the immigrants on the boats. They're stealing jobs. Oh, they're gonna change the character, the Christian character of our nation, all this stuff, the other stuff. And the reality is that people have moved throughout time immemorial, and to maintain modern Europe, to maintain an advanced 21st century political economy, you need bums on seats. You need bodies, okay? And you need them for lots of things, least of all to take care of the growing elderly population in the West, and to man all the stations and all the institutions and healthcare, education, everything, okay? It's not an elective. It's a requirement. Okay, where's that coming from? It's coming from the East. Where's the investment going? It's going to the East. Where's the direct foreign investment flowing? From the West institutions. Where are the returns? They're in the East. They're not in the West. So the entire Western Anglosphere and the Western Hemisphere is going to go through the same painful, degenerative process that Western Europe is currently going through. And there's just no way around that. There could have been a way off. There are plenty of off-ramps available. One of them is Russia has always wanted to look west, but they denied that. And there's countries in Europe like Hungary that are doing deals with BYD in China, a good advanced electric car manufacturer and all these others. And they will tell you, if you speak to their ministers, and I've spoken to some of their ministers in Budapest, and it's like, we just need a 1% access to the Chinese market. That's it. And that's the equivalent of getting a massive percentage of the European market. And they're ready to do business. But Europe and the EU have a different agenda because they're just so ensconced in controlling this European project. And the United States and these countries are just hypersensitive about any trade and commerce and also political exchanges eastwards, to the point where they're trying to drop this Iron Curtain down. And Ukraine is probably one of the biggest, examples of this, and Iran is another. And so rather than let the money and trade flow and everybody gets prosperous, because Europe has a lot to offer Central Asia and the Far East. They have a lot to offer in terms of know-how, engineering, history, culture, English language-based, applications. China and the Far East would like nothing more than to have that exchange. But some people have got other ideas. They want to dominate. They don't want a Chinese-led future. That's the problem. A Russian and a Chinese-led, a Eurasian-led future, that they will be charting the course of culture and civilization for the next 100, 200 years. That's the problem. Yes. And they think that they can gamify this through AI, and they can work around some of these unstoppable demographic trends through automation and robotics and AI. And last year, Elon Musk was saying we need to get to Mars and we need to do it like yesterday. And so we need to be a multiplanetary species. Otherwise, it's like it's all going to collapse here on Earth. Now Elon Musk isn't tweeting about Mars anymore. Did you notice that?
Yeah, no,
it sort of stopped. So it's but that was before the election. So he was clearly hyping that up, tethering that idea to the Trump administration. So that's what it comes down to, Danny. Final thing I'll say is there's a severe lack of imagination in the West. They can't visualize how they fit into the world in the future. That's, to me personally, the number one problem: a lack of imagination and vision. That's the problem that I see in the West, and it's creating other problems for everybody else. If it was just their own problem, and the West would just get depressed and pop pills and just disappear into oblivion, right. That's fine. But they're not doing that. They're trying to disrupt, to sabotage, and to derail other people who are actually building things.
Yes.
So this is the problem we face right now.
Yeah, the stark contrast, we didn't get into it too much really at all today, Patrick, but maybe for another time. But the stark contrast of the fact that the United States and its European vassals are working far harder to cut themselves off and to try to cut off the world from China, Russia, India, Iran, Brazil, right? All the BRICS countries, all of the rising multipolar countries working far harder to do this than to stop Palestinian people and children from starving, being maimed, being slaughtered, being victims of genocide. Far harder. I mean, that should tell us everything about the level of barbarism and the inward kind of rot and decline that this, as you call it, the Anglosphere, the Anglo Empire, Anglo-European Empire, whatever we want to call it, it is rotting internally, and it is really spewing up its guts on the rest of the world. And that's how I say it. When you see that contrast, that should tell everybody, and that's where we can connect these dots, is they're not doing a damn thing about stopping Israel from using U.S. and Western weapons beyond symbolic gestures, while they go for everything. And then finally, I'll just share this, Patrick. If anyone's confused about why Donald Trump is having a hard time settling Ukraine, why he's so belligerent economically with China, why he is seemingly so committed for a lot, to his master's plan to overthrow Iran, well, Palantir is a huge part of Trump's administration, and they have already admitted that the United States will likely fight a three-front war, wink, 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 and they'll be the ones pushing it. This is how the exact forces you just named, Patrick, this is how they think about the world. This is their worldview. This is their aim. They want total full spectrum dominance, and they will destroy everything and everyone that's trying to build their way out of it.
And that's the danger of that military Keynesianism, that, and this is a problem, in Britain, in Europe, remember it was good green jobs. You remember that? Good green jobs. Now it's good defense jobs. Yeah. Is what politicians say.
That's a big shift in branding. Yeah, that's a bigger shift than not many people are going to be duped by that one. A lot of people are going to be like, really? Especially Europeans, it's a real big mess. But yeah, you're exactly right, Patrick.
But if a king is ruling, the king's power is ultimately derived from his moral legitimacy. Okay, and that otherwise the sovereign can't rule. And the same in the international system. Whoever is the hegemon, because let's face it, all countries are not created equal. They're all different sizes and endowed with different resources and abilities and capabilities. So all countries are not created equal, but those who are well endowed who are allowed to rule in the international system, allowed to be the hegemons, ultimately their power is derived from the trust that they're able to maintain with other actors in the international system. Even if they're not perfect, and even if there might be, like, you know, the Vietnam War happening over here, the Cold War, the battle against communism, the overall that they can act as an honest broker most of the time. Not all the time, most of the time. And that there's some moral legitimacy there, that the country or the values that they represent maintain some high ideals. That's kind of disappearing right now. And that's actually the ultimate source of power. It's not military strength. It's not even financial preponderance, although that's huge. But it's at least the veneer of moral legitimacy. Yep. It's a requirement. It's a requirement. It'll get your foot in the door and allow you to ride point. And without that, and you're no longer in the driving seat. There's no way. You just can't. And you're seeing the kicking and screaming of this U.S. hegemon right now, and the British and the Europeans are the same. You know, they're part of that. They're part of that reality now, and it's embarrassing on a certain level when you look at politicians, but it's completely inevitable. And this is how empires fall.
Well, let me quickly go through super chats, and then we can head out of here. Thank you so much to Clut. Thank you so much to Kirk. Thanks, Sparky, for all your super chats. Really appreciate them. Wish we could go over them with more depth. I apologize for that. Thank you, Empire We Are, for all of your contributions. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today, who gave super chat. That's really generous of all of you. And I want to take the time out to thank all the moderators, as well as everyone who viewed here. Everyone, please do hit the like button as you leave. That helps keep the algorithm boosting our conversation, both with Professor Sachs and Patrick. Go to the video description where you can find Patrick's Substack. You can follow his work there. All the places of support here, Patreon, Substack, and so much more are also there. So check that out as you go. Take care, everyone. Any final words before we leave for the audience, Patrick?
No, I enjoyed the conversation. I listened in with Jeffrey Sachs beforehand. That was extremely interesting. So yeah, appreciate your work, Danny, on all this.
Great. Well, look forward to the next one, everyone. Take care. Good night.